Well, when we're talking about the conflict of Jerusalem, you have a current political situation, but you also have historic background, and then you also have religious beliefs. So, unfortunately or fortunately, they're all mixed together when you look at Jerusalem. Let's look at the historic aspects first. Jerusalem has a history with the Jewish people going all the way back to the time, of course, of King David. Really went back even further to that, to the time of Joshua. But in terms of it being a capital city, we remember that it was the capital of David's kingdom 1,000 years before the time of Christ. So the Jewish people feel that they have a 3,000-year history with the city of Jerusalem as the identification of the capital of their nation. This is very important, and even though the Jewish people have not lived there for 2/3 of that time, it's always been a center of their thought and focus in terms of national identity. And when you get closer to about the time of where you turn from BC to AD, the first century before Christ, then there was also another Jewish kingdom there in the time of the Hashmoneans, or what's known as the Maccabees. There was another kingdom there leading up to the time of King Herod and the opening up of the new covenant. Now, in that time, there are artifacts, there are archaeological vessels. There is enough proof that that happened there. So really, the historical evidence cannot be denied. And when people make a political conflict of it today, they're not denying, at least most people aren't denying that those historical facts took place. They're mostly claiming that isn't relevant. Now, in some aspects, in some circles that totally try to deny any historical background in the Bible or a conflicting religious interest, might say that even those historical facts are inaccurate, but not most people. Most people would accept that. Now, when you come up in history more, we need to realize that the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, have not lived in the land of Israel for most of the past 2,000 years. They really started coming back about 120, 130 years ago. There was always some Jewish people that lived here and lived particularly in the city of Jerusalem, but really in the 1880s, they started coming back in larger numbers. So the modern residents in Israel and in the city of Jerusalem is relatively short if you consider 120 years a short amount of time. Now, actually, Jerusalem was conquered by the Muslims in the Ottoman Empire in the year 1517. Amazingly enough, that's exactly 500 years from this year. And it was conquered by the British Protestants in 1917. So Jerusalem was conquered by the Muslims for 400 years, and then by the British from 1917 to 1967. So the Jewish people have then reconquered it from the year 1967 to today. So that gives a little bit of the historic perspective. Now, one last thing on the religious aspects of it. Of course, Jerusalem has meaning to the Christian community, both Catholic communities, Protestant community, evangelical communities, Pentecostal communities, but it also has meaning for the Muslims. Now, although it's interesting to note that the word Jerusalem, the name Jerusalem, is never mentioned even one time in the entire Quran, but there became a folklore afterwards that Muhammad visited the city, and therefore it took on a religious importance, and it's supposedly in the world of Islam the third most holy city after Mecca and Medina. But it became important religiously more in the religious struggle for the Muslims with the Jews and the Christians. They wanted to make an equal claim on it. And then when the Ottomans took over it in the 15th century, and they began to take possession and build religious Muslim institutions here, which made that more stressful. Now, just one last thing is when you look to the current issues today in Jerusalem, we do need to realize that a large part of the city of Jerusalem today is inhabited by Muslims, by Arabs. There's a part that's Jewish, and then of course there's some international areas in there. There is multiple residency in the city of Jerusalem today. For most of East Jerusalem, it's not really been safe for Jews to go there. So although it's in controlled security, really there's not that much access there. But all of the Jewish governmental institutions are all in the city of Jerusalem, central Jerusalem, and western Jerusalem. It's a little bit about the historic background to the issue. Okay.